I'm back in Spain for the launch of the Aston Martin Vantage. And sadly, Mark will not be joining us in this video as he's back in the United States, single-handedly trying to save a great American institution known as the Red Lobster. But we will be having a special guest to fill those mighty shoes. This is going to be like many of our other launch videos. You're going to hear directly from an engineer who worked on this car, where James is going to help explain some of the finer details of engineering and of course the engineering philosophy that went into this brand new generation of Aston Martin. Now from a macro perspective, I'm going to hit you with some of the finer technical points. This is a updated architecture. It is double wishbone front and rear. It makes 656 horsepower. It makes 590-ish foot-pounds of torque. It's good for 0 to 60 in the mid-threes. This makes like 30% more horsepower than the outgoing Vantage. All of the exterior panels are brand new. It is a much wider car. It's about 30 millimeters wider. You have 275 front tires, 325 rears. You have a locking E differential in the back, giant brakes, either steel or carbon ceramics, and you have all the cooling to boot. This is only an automatic car at this point. It has a 8-speed ZF gearbox, and it's making its power through an M177 derived 4-liter bi-turbo AMG engine with no hybridization and no fake engine noise. This car, with a helmet off, sounds healthy to say the least. You're gonna hear this a lot in this video as well. This is the first generation of Aston Martin that owners don't have to make excuses for, and that's directly from the people at Aston. They finally have the resources and drive and push, with the help of their new owner, Lance, to make these cars very, very competitive. So the interior space is miles better than it used to be. It genuinely feels like a $200,000 car. All the touch points are ultra premium feeling. The actual switch gear, while some of it is haptic, unfortunately, most of it has a clickiness, a tactile feel to it. Everything feels high quality, and you can customize this car to the hilt like you are expecting in a vehicle that now costs in the $190,000 range, and by the time you're done, it's in the low 200s. This is an expensive car. Seating position in this versus DB12 is lower. The Vantage is a 2-seater versus a not all that usable 4-seater, and you still have a hatch in the rear. The infotainment in this car is now Linux-based, is their own. It is relatively fast acting, and honestly it is. It has wired Apple CarPlay, it has Android Auto, and the computing power behind the head unit is far greater than it used to be. They tried to make this future-proof by giving it more computing power than was probably necessary given current technology. Past that though, I think it's time for us to go speak to James, the engineer who worked on this car. I'm back in Spain, this time for the Aston Martin launch, and I'm here with someone far more intelligent than me. This is James, and he is one of the engineers that worked on the new Aston Martin. Now, we've already talked about some of the broad technical details. It's time to talk to you about what you actually did. Now, there's a common misconception, I know this kills you, that this is just a facelifted 2018 Vantage. What's different?
So in terms of numbers, roughly around about 85% of the car is new in terms of hardware, and software is 100% new.
You have done a lot from a hardware perspective. Obviously, all new body panels. It's a much wider car than the outgoing variant. Let's start with suspension. It's still double wishbone front and rear.
Correct.
You have a new rear subframe, all new suspension component links, obviously, because you're now running much wider tires front and rear. How has the damping profile and the spring rates and bars, how's that philosophy evolved and gotten better or changed?
So with the introduction of new technology, that's unlocked a huge amount of tuning capability. The way in which we tune the whole chassis system, you sort of have to look at it in a more holistic manner. So that's all the way from the new tyre, the specific compound just for Vantage on the new Michelin Pilot Sport S5, all the way up through the anti-roll bars, bushes, spring rates, and the new Bilstein DTX dampers.
So you're working with a lot more mechanical grip than the outgoing variant. So your local stiffness, I know there's overall body stiffness and there's local stiffness. Your local stiffness and all your suspension hardpoints is far greater, correct?
Correct, yeah. So we already had, so Vantage already was quite a stiff platform, and really to try and push it any further was quite a significant challenge. And we have increased the global torsional stiffness, but really the focus for us on the new Vantage really was to add the stiffness in the places where you could work it. You could really work the suspension systems. What it does is connect the driver to the car, and that's what's really important to us, specifically for Vantage. It's a driver's car. We put the driver first. The feeling of a short car, an agile car, but also connected. So ensuring that the driver can feel exactly what the front and rear axles are doing. They can do that particularly where we've positioned the driver. The rotation point of the car is right the way through the hip, ideal, so you can feel exactly what it's doing. You get the feedback response from the rear axle, particularly with the increase in stiffness, but also the steering connection. And around the front, that's where we focused, ensuring that the feel, the feedback, and the connection and the linearity of the steering is exactly how we'd expect for a driver.
It's not a VGRS rack, it's fixed ratio, correct?
It's fixed ratio, yes.
A question I had for you off camera, and this is a question I have for a lot of engineers who do road cars. This is not a race car. How do you balance good road manners with track performance and track linearity? So if you take, say, the Porsche approach, they strip out as much of the, in their track-focused models, they go away from rubber bushing, so everything's spherical. They strip out the sound deadening, and it's fairly hardcore, but miserable on the street. And if you go the other extreme, like an older AMG Mercedes, you lose a lot of that feel on the road. How do you find the correct balance in a car like this? It's
always an interesting discussion to have and a debate to have, and actually quite a significant challenge that we are often set within the engineering team. So the product vision and direction of having both luxury and performance elements don't always go hand in hand, as you've just named a few examples. Certainly a challenge for us within the engineering team. One compromises the other. Exactly, normally. However, the trick really is to use the technologies to unlock the capability and the breadth of the car. So you will see that the car is actually really quite controlled in terms of body control. We've managed to maintain a very flat cornering, very good handling, change in direction, but also with that technology from the damping technology, with the dampers, we can actually maintain a lot of the ride comfort and ride quality. Is it the bandwidth now that the new dampers give you is how you try to? Exactly, and you can really change the character of the car through those dampers and through the whole chassis tune. And as I say, we always look at it. You have to look at it holistically. You have to look at it in terms of the tyre tune, all the way up through the suspension system, all the way through the body, all the way up to actually even the interior. So we have obviously a sports car. Yes. However, we still have high quality touch points. We have, if it looks like metal, it's metal knurled rotaries, controls, leather dash. No, this is the first time an Aston product is genuinely, you don't have to make excuses from the interior perspective. Exactly, and yeah, like I say, for us, that ability to deliver a sports car that also demonstrates luxury, like I say, was a real challenge, but it's something that was non-negotiable, really. Drivetrain-wise, you guys are sort of, again, alone on an island, at least in the European space. 911 is going hybrid. You don't get necessarily all the cars we get in the US here as well, but you have a relatively simple, but not, 4-liter twin-turbo V8. What's changed and why have you kept with that formula, I guess? Now we have the flexibility to really make that engine our own. It's really, with the changes we've made to it, it's quite unrecognizable, to be honest. Because you've done what? Cams, heads, turbos, compression ratios, and obviously all new software. So it's M177 in name only. Basically, correct. It's entirely different from what's coming out from Mercedes at this point. Why stick with a ZF 8-speed versus go to a dual clutch? I know you've got that question a million times, but why? So for us, the ZF 8-speed offers a really good balance, and in particular, the connection with the engine. So the engine, as you have experienced, has a huge amount of torque. Yes. And really, so you don't necessarily need to be up and down a gearbox to be able to exploit that or drive the car quickly. And for us, the ZF offers the real balance between a road car, an everyday road car, round town smoothness, and also on track. It's still perfectly capable with the learning we've had over the years of working with ZF, with working with that, or variants of that transmission. Our shift strategies, our shift speeds, our shift feel, they've all improved over the years. And really we felt that we could get exactly what we wanted from that gearbox, and there was no need to really look at anything else. Because you made internal changes to oiling path, correct, as well, for the ZF 8-speed? We have got some unique components on that ZF 8-speed, yes, for us specifically. And we still use that ZF 8-speed in the GT4 variant of this car. You know,
if it's good enough for a race car, it's good enough for a street car, basically. Yeah. No, I'm not arguing with you.
I think perhaps the old philosophy of DCT versus planetary autos now actually is a little bit actually in favour of the 8-speed of the autos.
Particularly around town, there's the smoothness that does not exist in many of the PDK aside, outside of many of the other, like the Tremec-based dual clutches are not particularly smooth around town. eDiff, you now have the latest Bosch traction control, and you have an eDiff in this car. It's basically a pump to a differential in the back, like a hydraulic pump. What does that allow you to do that you could not do in the prior generation Vantage?
So we still had an electronic differential on the previous Vantage. That was the first introduction of an eDiff for the company, and this is a new version. This is an all-new version of it. So obviously, all of that learning that we've had over the years, same as the transmission, we've applied into this, and really by connecting it to the Bosch ESP system, has really allowed us to unlock the full potential of that eDiff. And we've also shortened the final drive ratio as well by 5%. So more accel, more in-gear performance. And again, that's the driver experience.
Do you feel like this is the first time, Aston Martin, at least from an American perspective, has always had the plucky sort of view? You know, a lot of journalists and engineers realize that you didn't have the pockets of some of the big boy car companies. Do you feel like, though, with this generation and the DB12 is the first time you have the funding to actually build the cars you wanted to build to begin with?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we've almost had to, like you say, the plucky underdog,
yeah.
Or we've had to make excuses for some of the cars in the past. Here, we really haven't. Obviously, what that means is that there's a lot of pressure on the engineering team. But obviously with the...
Oh, you didn't, no white hairs yet, though.
I've trimmed them out. But, you know, the pressure is really on. There is no opportunity for failure. You know, that isn't an option. And the amount that's demanded of... And, you know, it is still a small team, but a very reliable and capable team. And now we just have the tools available to us to be able to, you know, really go deliver something that's quite special. And something that we're really, really proud of, and happy to, you know, pitch us against anything really.
I am very excited to see how this stacks up with some of its competition. So thank you for your time. I really, really appreciate this. Setting off in the Aston Martin Vantage. We're at Circuit Monte Blanco. We're on some relatively worn tires, and this is first off a street car, not a track car, so this is going to be the first half of our drive portion. First things first, we are in a car with the optional carbon ceramic brakes. We have the traction control mode in half on, half off. It's in the 5 mode, which is allegedly the fastest way you can drive this car, or at least the best way to drive this car according to the engineer. And I'm sitting on the right side of a car in a track I don't know very well, and my primary goal is to walk you through what this is like sort of at the limits, and of course, not crash it. All right, 4-liter V8, no fake engine noise. It sounds burly. It's mostly exhaust noise, not a lot of induction noise, but nothing wrong with that. The ZF 8-speed paired to it does a pretty good job. It feels kind of like the way it feels in the Supra, I'm gonna be honest. It's very fast upshift, not terribly quick to downshift, but it's far from intrusive, and it does a good job with this engine. It feels every bit of the 650-ish horsepower that it is. It is a very, very quick car, as I'm gonna demonstrate on the straights. Steering, this linear rack Does not have a lot of feel, but it's very direct. The 275s in the front work hard with this weight. The car is about 3,600 to 3,700 pounds. It's a big, big, heavy car. So come on in, bounce it on the nose, and accelerate. 150, 200, 230, 50, 260. Brakes a little early. These carbon ceramics do a good job. There's really good pedal feel because it's not brake by wire. Again, working the front end. Tires are very unhappy. Those were the dings you heard earlier. The E-diff as well, particularly in this traction mode, does a good job getting you in and out of corners. You definitely notice it's saving you, but it's not totally overwhelming the car. It's not stripping away driver involvement. I will say, if there is a negative about this car, out here, because it's hot out and because it's heavy, you definitely do not so nice things to the tires. It definitely runs them off pretty quickly. It is a very enjoyable car, though, I will say that. It is a very, very enjoyable car to drive fast. All right, I'm backing off some of the traction control now so I can do things that I can't do on the street. It does want to slide, which is exactly what I want to do in a car like this. Big front engine, V8, angry car. There isn't the most, I would say, feel in this car. Again, it's trying to find the balance between GT and it's trying to find the balance between GT car and very, very capable track performance vehicle. But yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit more sound before we go for a quick drive with a special guest. Man, this thing hauls ass. You're not Mark.
What? How'd you know?
This is Zach from The Smoking Tire. He's filling in, and he's driven nearly everything on the planet. First off, though, sir, let's do a big smoky launch.
Yes.
Not that smoky.
Smoky. Smoky into turn. Now I know why Mark's not here.
Yeah, this is a big, burly sort of feeling car. I mean, let's start with a V8.
Yeah.
Yes.
656 horsepower V8.
You couldn't hear it with the helmet on, or at least I couldn't, but out here, it's very loud in this car, and none of the noise is fake. It's all through the exhaust, nothing through the speakers, and that is a welcome change from modern sports cars.
Yeah, that is. I thought the car was too quiet inside on the track, and someone smartly said, just wait till you take your helmet off, because this is pretty loud, but in a good way.
Yeah, how do you've driven a lot of cars, you've driven a lot of Astons, so my first question for you is, how does this fall within the pantheon of Astons you've driven? Old Vantages, new Vantages, DB12, DB11?
I would say this is the best Vantage I've driven. It kind of reminds me of the V12 Vantage in the fact that this feels like it can be out of hand because it has so much power, but this feels more balanced than that car. That was just big engine, tiny car. And this is big engine, bigger car. But what this does is I think it threatens the DB12 because we're only 14 horsepower shy of that thing. And if you don't need the back seats,
this is a lot less money.
This is a pretty car and it's a lot less money.
As a street car, this thing hauls the mail.
Jeez.
How do you think this car drives, though, I guess, compared to the DB12? Does it feel smaller? Does it feel bigger? Dynamically, what's this car like?
I think it actually feels about the same size. I know that car is slightly bigger, but neither one has rear steer. This has a slightly quicker steering rack, which you can feel, but neither one had great steering feedback. And that car was surprisingly good in the canyons for being a big GT car. I think this feels a little stiffer, and it feels a little bit more like a hooligan, but they're not that different. It's just angrier.
I think as a street car, this is where this thing really shines. You don't notice the excess weight, and you never have the car so loaded up in the front end you can run the front off. As a street car with these big 275s, you have a lot of front end grip. The car turns in well because of the double wishbones. You've good feeling from the chassis. It's just, again, the steering is a little bit on the dead side. How do you feel about the gearbox? I mean, the joy of the old Vantage, I'm not sure if anyone bought it as a manual, is you get 3 pedals. And I feel like that would really fit the character of this car, but alas, you have a ZF 8-speed. What's your thoughts?
I'm disappointed in it. I think DCTs are so good, and as good as these automatics from ZF or other companies, but ZF's, in my opinion, the best. As good as they have gotten, in a car like this that costs this much money, you really notice the difference between this and something like Porsche's DCT or McLaren's.
Yeah,
and I know
the PDK is better than the Carrera.
The PDK is amazing, and you can get that transmission in cars that cost less money than this one. And they said in the press launch, like, they're going after Porsche Turbo,
yes,
which this competes with in some regards, but transmission is absolutely not one of them.
I think, this car competes against a lowly option Porsche Turbo, and it competes against like a fully loaded like Carrera GTS. The new GTS and new 911 is coming along, which, but depending, those videos are not out yet, so we can't really talk about it, but I do feel that the reason you buy this over a Porsche isn't necessarily it's more technically proficient or you have a better overall car. It's because the prestige part of the brand and the character that this car has. I think it has more soul than a 911 does. Not a GT3 or a GT3 RS or the 911 ST, but like if you're comparing this to a Carrera GTS or a Turbo, I feel like this has got a lot more personality.
Yes, I think personality for sure. It's got more curb appeal. It's a more unique design when it pulls up to a curb. It makes that sound.
Yes.
I prefer the V8 sound to the flat 6 sound. And now that they've changed the front end with the new headlights, I think it looks much better in the front. And if you pull up in a GTS, unless someone really knows cars, they might just go, oh, it's a Carrera, or oh, it's a 911T. The shape is just too common. But this stands out because it's pretty rare. Everybody knows it's an Aston Martin, and they know that there's like only 3 cars made by Aston, and none of them are Macan. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
So it's a special brand. It's loud, and now they fixed the things I didn't like about it, which were the interior and the front end shape.
Yeah, there's nothing else like this too. I think that's sort of the weird thing if you think about it. There are no double wishbone, rear drive, front engine, big sporting coupes left that make this kind of power and are this exotic. Everything's mid-engined. Everything is, like a Ferrari. There's not really a car a sports car that does more street than track and that, competes in this space.
Yeah, it is a shrinking market, and the F-Type, like the first F-Type R was like this, but it was not as nice inside.
And it was nowhere as good to drive.
And that's true. It wasn't as good to drive. It was kind of a 2-note thing. It could do burnouts,
sideways.
It could do sideways, and that was it.
So with that, Zach, I really appreciate your time. I think it's time for us to head on the final thoughts.
Thanks, Mark.
Final thoughts on the new Aston Martin Vantage. Now that I'm a little less sleep deprived and jet lagged, we're going to do my best to summarize the pros and cons of this vehicle. First off, huge thanks to James, the engineer I interviewed, the English PR team, Kevin and Jay, and of course, our American PR rep from Aston, Morgan. Now, what do you need to know? Let's start with the positives. In the past, you bought the Aston and you had to make a bunch of excuses for it. It didn't drive particularly well, the interior wasn't all that nice. You bought it because you liked the way it looked and the James Bond connection along with maybe Formula One. Now, the car is legitimately competitive. It is a very nice place in the interior space. Everything's well assembled, there's a good level of attention to detail, the customization options are excellent and are exactly what you're looking for in a high-end sports car like this. The exterior styling, I know styling is subjective, but it is a very pretty car, at least in my eyes. Dynamically, it's got a lot of character. It feels like a burly, premium V8 muscle car that is incredibly fast in a straight line. Aston figured out how to give this 4-liter V8 a lot of character. It's fun to slide around, and it's fairly transparent in what it's trying to do. What are its cons? You can argue the 8-speed ZF gearbox is not as good as the Porsche PDK, because it's not. But I will say around town and most of the time, it's better feeling than the Tremec dual clutch. The steering, while it is very direct, it is largely lifeless. And you could say some of the interior electronics aren't that easy to use. The last thing I'm gonna bring up is it sort of fits like a regular Carrera GTS in between a track car and a dedicated sports car. You can say, because it is, it's too heavy for extended track duty, and it really is. It very quickly overworks the front tires, particularly when it's hot out. With that said though, I do think this is a very, very special car to drive, and if you do have the money and you want to buy something like this, I do think it should be on your short list. With that, thanks for watching, hope to see you soon.